Next question, again from number 25 rather than today. Drugs are always a controversial subject. Some are considered medicines, others controlled substances. I think if it helps someone, it's considered a medicine, period. What are your thoughts about marijuana, fungi, and psychedelics? Hashtag legalize nature. So this is something that we have addressed a few times, but because it came at a high money value from someone who clearly hasn't heard us talk at all about this, I thought we'd give it a minute or two.
Sure. So I would say number one thing is these things can be very useful. They can be a tremendous relief. They can provide insight. I would say number one thing, though, is don't treat them as recreational. They are very serious, and it doesn't mean you shouldn't have a great time and have a smile on your face as you do, but treating them as frivolous is a mistake. They are powerful enough to do great things, and they are powerful enough to mess you up if you don't, I would say, curate your experience such that it stands a good chance of being productive. But if you think these things aren't for you, they probably aren't. If you think they might be for you, engage cautiously. Think carefully about the damage you may do to your health. There's a difference between the molecule and the way it's delivered. In the case of marijuana, you can mess up your lungs if you smoke it, so maybe consider doing it some other way, which is now much easier than it once was. But a cautious, positive view of these substances and their potential, but advice to engage them carefully.
Yeah, and I guess I would just add the hashtag that the person who asked the question ends with, hashtag legalize nature, is an apt one. That at the point that something has, even if it's been derived from a plant, but synthesized in a lab such that it has no resemblance at all to the plant or animal, or more often fungus, from which it derived, the more likely it is to do you harm and to have very little resemblance to the state that it might have produced if you were imbibing it from the organism in which it came. So, you can use that very broad rubric, that sort of rule of thumb, to say, okay, avoid those things which require that you stick a needle in your arm or snort powder up your nose, and know that there is both long evolutionary relationship between humans and many of these species, and maybe more importantly, there is long cultural history, not for most of us within whatever sort of mutt-like aggregate culture that we come from, but for many, many cultures have a relationship with entheogens in particular, and learning from what other people have learned from their use of hallucinogenic plants and fungus mostly is an important first step, and it can be incredibly valuable to do so yourself.
Yeah. But don't lick a toad without consent. I would say written consent is probably safest.
So let me just say that on the very first time that I had students in the tropics, before we were at Evergreen, I had just been hired on to teach a tropical animal behavior class at a little field station in Panama. I heard tell that some of my students were licking frogs, and I had to give them a hard time because these were not even the right toads.
Oh, goodness.
They were not the right toads at all. And I thought, if you're going to seek these sorts of experiences out, at least get the organisms right.
Yeah. Licking frogs and taking names.